Behold, overshields are good when they don't suck. Take a gander at that health bar, folks. Looks pretty full, doesn't it? Pretty purple, pretty full all the time against these spicy gunners. What's up, human beings? My name is ZanyPants, and this is FrameWork, my Warframe weapon synergy build series. Today we're talking about Gara, whose glass fragments reduce incoming damage to both health and shields. So we're using the Rakta Dark Dagger, whose innate passive grants you shields based on the damage you deal if your target has a radiation proc. Despite using no survivability mods of any kind on our Gara, we are very tanky due to the static overshield cap. The Knell and the Lens are specialized to kill enemies you don't want to melee, whether they're stuck in your glass and immune to status, or there's just a whole lot of them. And Taxon has very high value here, since you can cast your glass on it to make sure it sticks around to give you even more overshields. And we haven't even scratched the surface of the infinite theoretical scaling of Gara's glass shattering mechanics. The result is a mighty tank with the damage to back it up. Overshield Gara. As I just touched on, one of the many advantages of this build is that you don't have to use any survivability mods at all. One powerful quality of overshields is that you don't need a mod to allow yourself to get more of them. Overshields cap out at 1200 no matter what your initial max shields are and regardless of how you gain the overshields. So as you've seen, without any mods to increase your effective health pool in any way, you can cap out your shields at 1500, which equates to 15,000 effective health after your glass fragments reduce incoming damage by 90%. Shields are normally considered weak because they're unaffected by armor, but Gara's glass is one of the very few damage reduction abilities that does affect shields, and you can see that the result is quite powerful. It also gives us lots more mod space, which allows us to mod for everything and still have a decisive focus on duration. As you can see, the overall power stats on this build are very high, but you do have to get your hands a little dirty to get there. The Rakta Dark Dagger does indeed restore shields into overshields based on percentage of the damage you deal with it as long as the target has a radiation proc, but besides that unique quality, this weapon is really bad at base. By pulling out all the stops, we can manage consistent status procs with this build, but I just want to emphasize how bad this weapon's base stats are with 10% status, 5% critical chance, a 1.5 critical multiplier, and then, okay, not so bad, but a relatively normal 50 radiation damage and 1.0 attack speed. You really wouldn't use this weapon unless it was just the covert lethality stick, or you wanted its little stealth passive, which can be okay for speed running through missions, but this is really a good example of a weapon that you wouldn't have any reason to use to actually hit enemies with it unless you were using it as part of a synergy. This build works because Weeping Wounds multiplies our total modded status chance, so after a few hits you will get status procs regularly, and covert lethality does help a lot here. The forward combo on Stinging Thorn does open enemies to finishers, which will guarantee kills, and Gara's passive blinds nearby enemies in bright light from time to time. I find this is really unreliable, but it will sometimes CC enemies and give you instant kills when you do finishers on them. And if you happen to do a finisher on a radiation proc enemy, you'll gain massive overshields, usually a full restore. And if all that wasn't enough, you might have noticed that the damage from actually just attacking enemies with this dagger is actually not that bad. And of course, that's due to condition overload. You can get 4 status procs pretty easily with this build, corrosive and radiation innately on the weapon, and then a forced slash proc on a lot of the combos of Stinging Thorn, on top of occasional viral procs from the Red Veil Syndicate power on Gleaming Blight. Your main priorities in combat are maintaining your glass fragment shield and topping off your overshields, but your secondary goal is to stack damage into your glass fragments like so. Using Mass Vitrify refreshes the duration of your glass fragments, and any glass that shatters in the presence of your fragments adds to their damage. You want to cast your Mass Vitrify when you need a refresher on your fragment's duration, and then you're going to want to jump outside the wall, turn around, and shatter it with Shattered Lash. If your Mass Vitrify is shattered while you're outside of it, where the enemies are going to take damage, your fragments absorb that damage for their duration. And if you keep refreshing the duration instead of recasting, this damage over time effect can become quite powerful. Try to cast your fragments on your Sentinel whenever you get the chance by walking backwards and looking up and to the left. Mass Vitrify will also refresh the duration on your Sentinel, so you don't have to worry about doing that in the middle of a fight unless you let it expire. You only have to do this little glass ritual once every 45 seconds or so with my duration, so when you aren't doing that, melee people for overshields. Sometimes you need to build up combos so that you can get more status chance, and in that case you don't want finishers to insta-kill targets. You can glass enemies to keep them still for combo building, but my personal favorite way is to use the block combo, which bypasses the finisher on the forward combo. This allows you to build up some status and get some hits in while they have a radiation proc. Moving on to the Nell, which is mostly here for clearing out enemies stuck in your molten glass. Gara's rebuffed wall is basically indestructible as long as you cover some enemies with it, since it scales based on the health of the enemies inside of it, and the enemies in this game have insanely high health, so you have lots of time to kill glassed enemies. The problem is that they're immune to status while covered in glass, which means that you can't further reduce their armor. One solution would be to manipulate the status duration pausing effect of Gara's glass, and if you're from the future, you can check out my full video on that topic in the description of this video, but the other more straightforward way is just to overwhelm the enemies with raw damage. Gara's glass gives you a damage multiplier akin to Nova's molecular prime, which will help you break through that reinforced armor. The issue would be ammo economy or not enough sustained damage, and the Nail solves both of those problems with its headshot buff. You might be worried about missing your first shot, but you won't because the enemies are literally standing still in glass, and then you can use that infinite ammo buff and the damage scaling to rip through their glassed up bodies. With its high fire rate once the buff is active, the Nell is also our backup source of corrosive proccing if you need that against the boss. You don't have enough armor stripping and upfront damage, but overall this loadout is designed to ignore or overwhelm armor rather than removing it. On that topic, the lens is the simplest piece of the puzzle. It does a ton of damage, it can clear out groups of enemies, it has terrible status chance, so it appreciates both corrosive projection and the damage buff from Gara's glass, and it has a bit of a wind-up time. If you accidentally get caught in your own blast radius, you can also use Mass Vitrify's invulnerability period to save yourself. It kicks in right at the beginning of the cast, so don't worry about the cold proc, just slam the 4 key and you will survive. You could even do this on purpose to damage enemies that have you surrounded. You all know that this is a good weapon, not much else to see here, although you should note that using a fire rate mod over heavy caliber is a DPS increase as long as you're firing more than once in succession and you aren't having ammo problems. In mission types like defense and survival, this will probably be the case and I recommend it, but overall I do think heavy caliber is better, especially because as you've seen, the accuracy reduction doesn't really do anything on this weapon. So that covers just about everything except for Spectro Rage. Yep, that just about covers it for Overshield Gara. This is one of my new favorites. It feels very versatile and powerful, and it's pleasant to mostly ignore armor scaling instead of having to worry about stacking corrosive or slash or whatever. I hope you enjoyed this framework build as much as I'm enjoying playing it. If you did, check out others like it by looking for that film reel style thumbnail when I upload content in the future, or just by checking out my framework playlist on the main page of my channel. You may be particularly interested in my framework for Mesa, which is one of my overall most powerful frameworks, just like this one, and also features a damage reduction mechanic, her Shatter Shield, that affects shields the same way that Gara's glass fragments do. You can take a look at that in the description, but for now, I want to thank you all very much for watching, and invite you to subscribe if you had a good time. Check me out elsewhere on the internet in the description, and I'll see you all next time.